Hello, I'm Najmul Hassan back again. In this short session, I will show you, introduce you to Stellarium. So, what is Stellarium? Stellarium is a free open source planetarium for your computer. It shows you a realistic sky, just like what you see with the naked eye, with binoculars or telescope. You can Google search for Stellarium and you will reach a page of this kind, and you can download the version which you require, whether you have Windows 64-bit, Windows 32-bit, Mac, Linux, whichever. Okay, and once it's installed, you can use it. So I'll briefly show you how the software can be used. And okay, so I'll run a session of Stellarium, which I've installed on my computer. And this is what this Stellarium looks like. Okay, you can use your mouse to rotate to whichever direction you want, towards the west, or you want to see the north side, or east, or whichever. Okay, so first thing you have to do is this, to set the location. If you get your cursor to the left hand corner, this panel pops up and you can set the location window, and here you search for whichever place you require. For example, if I say Hyderabad and I search, it gives me the location of Hyderabad, and I add it. I use it as a default. Otherwise, you can give the latitude and longitude of the place and do it. Okay, so I have set the location, and then I set the time also, date and time. So usually the date and time are taken from the system time of your computer, and they are pretty accurate. 14:52, 18 seconds on 12th of April 2020. And as you notice now, the time which is flashing here is 2:52, almost 3 in the afternoon. And hence, if you look up in the sky, you don't see any stars. You see some faint objects here, but you can't see anything else because of the sky glow. The sun is still high up in the sky, and we are unable to see any objects. The moment you move your cursor below, a panel pops up here, and you notice here, if I click this, it switches off the atmosphere. So if Earth did not have an atmosphere, even during the day, we would have seen the stars. The sky would have appeared dark. And these are the stars which you would have seen right now. You have Castor and Pollock of the Gemini constellation. You have Regulus rising here. You have Sirius here, which is a part of a constellation called Canis Major. And okay, and you see this panel, you have constellation lines. So if I switch on the constellation lines, it gives you all the constellations. And if I switch this on, it gives me the names of the constellation. Constellations are star patterns which rise and set together. And people drew these dots to see patterns in it. For example, if I switch off these constellation lines, you see a set of stars here, but people imagined it to be, if I switch it on, two people standing here. These are the heads, these are the legs and the body. And if I switch on the constellation figures, This is what they saw. They saw the Gemini constellation, the twins, two twins. Similarly, here you will notice there's a lion rising. Yeah, these are all imaginary pictures, and I can move the sky faster. It is moving at a certain with the rotation of Earth, but I'm speeding it up, and I'm seeing that the stars are, see, Leo constellation has risen. So this is what people saw and thought was a lion in the sky. These are just stars at different distances, but the pattern appears to rise and set together because of the rotation of Earth. So this is what they imagined. They imagined this is the Leo constellation, in which you have a bright star called the Regulus. Then we have this Hydra. We have the Sexton and Leo, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and Ursa Minor, the Small Bear. Right? So we can switch on these constellations or and the constellation lines or not. Similarly, you can switch on the grid, the alt-azimuth lines or the equatorial lines, these, right? And similarly, we can switch on or switch off the planetary objects. This will switch off or switch on galaxies. Or so yeah, another good thing with this is we can search for an object. Suppose I search for Andromeda. I search for the Andromeda, the Great Andromeda Nebula, and if I zoom into this, and if you just zoom, you'll see that there's that point object which you saw is actually a whole galaxy, right? So when we see in the night sky, we would see it as a faint object here, but if you use a binoculars or bigger and bigger telescope, you'll start seeing the whole galaxy. Similarly, you have another small galaxy here, M110. Okay, similarly, we can search for any other object, say Saturn. I search for Saturn, and at the moment it is below the horizon, and I can switch off I can remove the Earth, the surface, and again I can zoom into Saturn, and you will see Saturn and the objects. Okay, and these are the moons of Saturn. All these are Rhea, Titan, Hyperion. These are all the moons of Saturn. Similarly, we can search for any other object. Jupiter. It takes you there and you can zoom in and see Jupiter in all its glory. You can see the bands of Jupiter and the storms which are going on. So coming back to the present time and rescaling back to our normal size, I can see all these beautiful objects. Here NGC 6543. These are star forming regions. Right? Yeah. So what are the things we can do with this? There are innumerable things which can be done with Stellarium. First thing you should do is get familiar with the whole software. So install it and get familiar of how do you zoom in, zoom out, and how do you okay. And I can switch on or switch off the atmosphere. For example, I'll put back the atmosphere, and since the sun is up, you cannot see the stars. And now I will speeden up. Yeah, so when I press this, it will get me to the current time, which is 3 o'clock, and the sun is at this height. And if I speed up the rotation of Earth, you'll see that the sun is setting, and it is setting slightly off west. And as it sets, the twilight begins, and you can start seeing the other objects. So what do we see? We can see the time, 1958, and the Venus is going down. You can see what time Venus is going to set, around 9 o'clock, you will see Venus set. And on the other hand, you can turn around on the east and see how things are rising and at what time are they rising. So I make the whole motion faster, and I see the moon rise somewhere around 11 o'clock, and then the Jupiter rises at 140, 150, then Mars is rising around 240, Saturn is also risen, and you notice that Moon, Jupiter, Saturn and Mars, these days, they all are falling in one straight line, all the way up to Mercury. Okay, so another good thing with this software is you can plan your observations. Suppose you want to observe on a certain date, say I want to observe on 8th, fourth month, but on say 28th, and I want to see what is going to be rising at say 19 hours, 7 o'clock in the evening. So I've set the date as 24/2020, and I've set the time as 19:36:41 minutes, and I will run this from this moment fast, and I will notice that Arcturus has risen, and which are the interesting objects which are rising, what are objects you can observe. Haidar is here, Regal Kent is here, NGC 623 butterfly cluster. There are various objects which are rising, and Jupiter is rising around 1 o'clock, Saturn, Mars. Right, so if you want to plan out your observation on a certain day, certain location, you can change the location, you can change the date, you can change the time, and you can run the whole thing. So with this, I will stop this session, and try to install it on your systems. And if you have issues or problems, you can discuss when we meet. Okay, bye-bye.